Taxpayer money at work here. The $11 billion VNI West project, and these clowns are going to be here for doing their EES study for about 5 minutes.
Not even 5 minutes.
And it's all in the floodplain here.
It's all in the gully. How smart is our fucking government?
So your taxpayer money is employing these clowns.
Mate, look at the fucking gully all the way through here.
For an $11 billion project, which is the VNI West. And this is the respect they do to a environmental study. This is their environmental study on the side of the road, not even where a tower is going to be. And these clowns think they're good at doing their job. Have you got your licence there?
My licence?
Yeah.
For what?
Social licence to be here.
I don't think I need one of them.
$11 billion project, and you're destroying our farms. This bloke wants to take it all away. Just little goons of Alistair Parker. A whole lot of them. Then they got their security there.
As soon as the chance how that's a study.
5 minutes, right on 5 minutes. That's their EES done in this area. This is where a tower is going through for the VNI West.
And welcome to the Country Telegraph. Saw about yesterday. Well, not well, still not well, but onward and upward. That's what I think. Before we get into our first guest, Peter Ridd, some of the headlines that are making news around Australia. An inquiry has found that the Northern Basin Toolkit has severely under-delivered on its environmental commitments, with key infrastructure projects falling dramatically short of their original targets of the program's 7 years. Now, the Albanese government and Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen have announced nearly $1 billion in funding for her electorate and key Labor seats ahead of November state election, which is called pork barrelling, I believe. Now, what about this? Jacinta Allen's doing a magnificent job for Victoria. The CFA was forced to fight January's fires without 25% of its assistant chief fire officers and 34 commanders, according to authority insiders and volunteers. A national gun buyback scheme introduced in the wake of a terrorist attack at Bondi Beach has stalled, with a majority of Australian states and territories declining to join the program by the March 2026 deadline, which was set by the Albanese government. The Tasmanian government is delivering more bulk billed healthcare services for Tasmanians. That's with the first Tassie Doc clinic delivering more access to GP services for communities in Deloraine, Westbury and surrounding areas. Agents say Western Australia's sheep producers are finally being rewarded after a tumultuous few years in the sector, with grower confidence increasing over the past 3 months and many operators buying back into the sheep. So that's the news making headlines around Australia. Just a reminder, by the way, folks, subscribe to the Country Telegraph. You can do that on YouTube and Rumble, or follow us on Facebook and X. And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. I should have stayed in bed. We talk again today about data centres and the reality and fantasy surrounding these projects. In the face of this investment surge, the Australian government indicated in March that data centres or data centres here will no longer be treated as just another property or tech investment, but as major infrastructure with real effects on the power grid, water systems, land use and local communities. Now, if the government adheres to its own rules, new data centre projects should bring their own power or help to fund it. They should use recycled or non-drinking water and should create real local jobs and skills. These are all moot. What is certain is that projects that come on stream will compete with household consumers and agriculture for power, water and land. And what will taxpayers be contributing? Now, Rafe Champion grew up in far northwest Tasmania on a dairy farm, studying agricultural science at the University of Tasmania. Rafe has a master's degree in sociology and the history and philosophy of science. His books include several of the philosophy of Karl Popper and joint efforts with Ruth Park on the iconic boxer Les Darcy and with Jeff Grimshaw on climate science and energy issues. Now, Rafe also writes for The Spectator. Rafe, thank you for joining us. Where do they get their electricity from, their power from?
Well, up to date, I gather they're just drawing it out of the grid. But that can't go on, not at the rate that they're growing. And they're just not going to get it from wind and solar. I think they're taking up the slack of power, which we've lost. We've lost so many industries, and in the last 12 months, 10% of small restaurants, cafes and coffee shops. So data centres have turned up to pick up the slack of power that's been lost from those services.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it? I think and then there's the water. The water to maintain a particular level of temperature in the data centres, that's also another issue. Where do they get that from?
Well, that's obviously a major issue, although I've read people saying we recycle the water, so we just have to top it up like you top up water in a swimming pool, just lose a bit of evaporation. But the amount of cooling required is epic, and I just don't know how they're going to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, isn't it? The federal government seems to be quite flippant with its rules and regulations, and we see that not only are they destroying and being flippant with the lives of farmers across Australia with their renewable projects, whether it's in the Great Dividing Range, and taking the top off and putting on those monstrosities called windmills or turbines, but we also have the issues with these data centres, and they're going to affect communities. What do you think we should do with it? What do you think? Which direction should we go?
Well, you haven't, but you really asked the wrong person that question, because so much of this is new to me, Mike. I'm catching up. I'm a steep learning curve here, but that's where my amusement comes in. I'm amused to think that they're actually going to be able to do it. The big thing about data centres, the power they require is large in quantity, but it has to be continuous. It has to be unbroken. You can't stop and start. It's like smelters. So they're just absolutely not going to get their power from wind and solar. And overseas they're doing it with gas. Things are with the backup. In Australia, they're terribly short of gas, thanks to state governments. And so it's just going to be really interesting to see how much of the projected growth can actually occur.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've got some stats handed to me. It says here that tech giants have pledged to spend upwards of $50 billion in Australia building the new industry. That's an incentive for the government. Also, Amazon announced a $750 million centre in Logan, Queensland, will be operated by robots. What could possibly go wrong? Well, what could go wrong is that we have these monstrosities, and the communities that a business would serve is not serving them. They have no one working there except the skeleton staff and a robotic staff, so that's not good for the local community. Australia has the second largest pipeline of data centre construction in the world after the US, with investment booming globally to accommodate the computing needs of artificial intelligence. Can you suggest how we could implant some of that intelligence into Canberra? Is there a secret?
Well, I'm working on that. That's one of my projects. But really, just be a little bit realistic about this. I've been looking at not. Well, I've seen the numbers on the number of billions of dollars that are supposed to be spent by tech giants, and I'm looking at the numbers of gigawatts of power, like 3.5 at present. Okay, well, that's been soaked up, taking up the slack of the industries that we lost. But then we've got a great deal more coming on over the next few years, and as I said, it can't come from wind and solar. So it's got to be an absolute mystery where it's going to come from, because there's nowhere near enough gas available to substantially increase the input of gas power quickly. We could do it with coal, of course, and coal is absolutely the obvious and ideal way to go if we want to have lots of data centres. But otherwise it's just not going to happen.
Tell me this, Rafe. WA, long way away from where you are, but plans are underway to build the nation's biggest data centre in Western Australia's remote far north to support large-scale artificial intelligence training, including systems like ChatGPT. Now, the facility, which is south of Broome, the nation's biggest data centre, they're going to build that in south of Broome in the Kimberleys. It would predominantly run on renewable energy and is intended to support training of, as I said, large AI models. They're going to use renewables for this. We know that data centers chew up an amount of energy. We also know that, as Malcolm Roberts would say, the renewables are unreliables. When we have, say, for example, a wind drought, or when we have just no wind at all, just even for those intermittent times, so it's not a drought, the data center will then need to have a backup, won't it? It will need to be able to keep everything running. Where do they get that energy from?
Well, it's going to have to. It can only be diesel. It can only be diesel, and I'm glad you mentioned WA, because I wanted to get this in somewhere on the program. This morning at 7 o'clock, when I checked, in Western Australia, the wind was providing 2% of the power required to fuel the state of WA. And when I looked 20 minutes ago, it was still 4%. You can barely see it on the Nibmot widget. So good luck on a day where you get on a night when you've got enough wind to power 2 or 3 or 4% of the state's demand. There's none. There's none there for the data centres. None.
It's actually really interesting too. The renewable energy advocates, they want the government to ensure that data centres use renewable energy. Well, that's impossible. And minimal amounts of water, that's also impossible. So I would imagine if they're going to build it south of Broome, they'd have desal plants. Questions are, one, they're going to be using a lot of water, unless it's a very expensive desal plant. The amount of water required to cool the actual facility down, whether that will be enough. And secondly, what do they do with the wastewater? Do they pump it straight back into the ocean? And this wastewater is quite polluted.
Well, as soon as you start talking about desal centres, you're talking massive amounts of energy again.
Yes.
So that just adds to the amount of energy that's not available. It's just beyond comprehension how they can think up these things.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, isn't it? I just think I think we're in all sorts of trouble right now. Just your thoughts. Do you think we need to just pull back a bit, because a good idea at this stage is probably a good idea, and when you look into it, it has so many legs on it. For example, where do you get the energy? Where do you get the water? Who offsets the cost to build it? What about the local communities? If you build within major metropolitan areas, you're going to destroy communities. What happens to their power supply and so forth? So the good idea, we'll build a data centre. Everyone's building these things. We need to look into it more, don't we? We need to actually understand the implications it will have on this country.
Well, it's like every other thing. We need an informed discussion with the best authorities, the best brains, explaining these things in terms that the people, the voters, can understand. But I've got to come back to wind droughts. I see wind droughts of the thin end of a wedge to drive a truck right through every stupid scheme that's going on at the present time that involves energy, which includes, obviously, data centres. We just need wind literacy. And what I'm going to suggest is for your channel to put on a show at 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening, put up a screenshot of the NemWatch widget so you can see how much power, green power, in each state is coming from wind. And if you put that up every day, then people over a period of time will get the message. Like sometimes there'll be lots of wind, sometimes there won't, but it's got to be there all the time. So if people get to see this consistently, the mystique of wind power will evaporate and go away.
Yep, I agree. Now, if somebody wants to have a chat with you, or read your writings, or find out more about Rafe, how do they do that?
Well, there's two sources. There's my Substack, and there is my website, which is called the Rat House because it was put up round about the time I went to a conference in Vienna, and the conference was in the Great Hall, which was called the Rath House. So with the Aussie irreverence, I decided to call my website the Rat House.
Oh, very good. Very, very clever. Was that after a couple of Reds?
And it's a beautiful site because my first wife was a wonderfully gifted artist at Kilmeny in Ireland, the daughter of Ruth Park and Darcy in Ireland. Wonderfully gifted artist and illustrator. And the site's actually a work of art. What do you think about my writing that's hanging on it?
Very good. Look, Rafe, we will do more of these things. I love what you have to say. I think it has a great merit to it also, and your credibility is second to none. Rafe Champion, thank you so much for your time, sir. This is the Country Telegraph.
But first to the astonishing scenes playing out in regional Victoria. Furious farmers are holding the line against outrageous compulsory acquisition laws pushed through the Parliament by the Allen Labor government last year, which allows energy companies to access private farmland to assess the site for new high voltage power lines, whether they like it or not. And this is land south of St Arnaud, all the way through to Kerrang and the Burrum area on the Murray River border. It's all part of the Victoria's so-called renewable energy transition.
Our access here today. So are you going to step aside and allow us to do this work today?
No.
No? I've given you a warning and a direction, and now I'm cautioning you. And I'm going to direct this at you, Ben, because you're the only one I'm able to identify. That anything you do or say may be used as evidence. Are you going to allow us to assist with us by either telling me who is the person responsible today, or allowing us access to facilitate our access today? I'll take that as a no if you're not going to answer.
You give someone a title and a high-vis shirt and they act like police. It's unbelievable. Reports today that two farmers, a father and son, have been charged for restricting access to their land. But the Department of Public Prosecution dropped that action ahead of what would have been court proceedings today. For others, hefty thousands and thousands of dollar fines, they're in the mail. One of the farmers targeted late last week was Ben Duxton, and he joins me now. Ben, I am telling you what, I'm coming back right into this issue, particularly ahead of the November state election. I remember, we talked about it a lot last year, and I went up and filmed your way. This is the result of what you warned would happen. That legislation ran through the Parliament last year. This is your private farmland, and they are just walking on and demanding you roll over for these towers. Tell us about your encounter.
Yeah, I think you see from the footage there, Peter, and other footage that people might have seen during the week on our Facebook page, on our farmers' Facebook page, but just the disrespect, the arrogance and the intimidation of these people. And these are authorised officers. So we didn't know where the authorised officers were going to come from, but they're DECA employees, so a government employee agency, and they're out there reading us the Riot Act. And I can tell you, I've had calls from farmers, from ex-landholders, from generational farmers, and I couldn't repeat what they said to your viewers here tonight. But just the arrogance of it and the way they're going about this really smacks. And it's not these DECA people that we've got a problem with. It's fairly and squarely on the government, and Vic Grid and Alistair Parker, Jacinta Allen need to come out here, and they need to be the ones that try to force us off our land. We live and work on these places. We're going to be there. We're not moving. It's at a stalemate at this stage, and we will stand. We're getting bigger and bigger support, grassroots support throughout Australia, and we will not back down. We'll be there to fight.
Now, remind my viewers what you're fighting against here, because when those transmission towers go through, anyone who is a cropper is not going to be able to use great parts of their land because of the standoff from these massive towers. But of course, you have lots of fires out your way and beyond to the South Australian border, and it limits aerial fire work, firebombing and other things. Take us through some of the issues in a practical sense for farmers here.
No, 100%. All those things you say are actually real. The devaluation of land's another thing. The biggest problem we have here is that this isn't a policy for Australia for the future. This isn't, it's not environmentally sound, it's not financially sound, and it's certainly not social sound. So it gets way back to the net zero, how we need to do this. This isn't going to keep the lights on. This is a government-induced energy crisis they're talking about. We have Alistair Parker running around saying, there's 26 farmers holding up this critical infrastructure that's going to have the lights go out. Well, that's just simply not true. We've had reliable, cheap power here in Australia for many years and decades now, and this is just a land grab of these people. And the land's going to be owned. The whole line's going to be owned by a Spanish multinational company. Like this is, and the government's just rolling the red carpet, or as Gerald Feeney says, the diamond encrusted red carpet out. And as I said before, we live and work on this land. We will not be backing down. If they want to have a civil war with us, we'll be there, and we'll stand for our rights.
I tell you what, mate, I'm coming up with cameras. We're going to go to war over this issue. It is a huge issue, because if they get you to roll over, if Victoria rolls over, this will be the model right across the country. And you can see with this fuel crisis, what we are desperate to use in this country are the fossil fuels that we have here. It's not the wind and solar farms owned by foreigners that are at issue. So thank you, Ben. We'll talk, and we'll be up there soon.
Keep in touch. Thank you.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Very serious issues in Victoria with the Victorian state government, which is walking around in a disastrous state right now. The state of disaster maybe could be the logo for those in the bush in Victoria. Now, issues for the beef industry and voluntary code of fake meat labelling is what we're talking about today. Will Evans is CEO of Cattle Australia. Now, Cattle Australia is a powerful voice representing Australian cattle producers. Will has extensive experience in cattle industry representation, and prior to joining Cattle Australia in 2025, he was CEO of the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association. Now, Will has been involved in policy development and the live export trade. Will, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. I really appreciate it, mate.
Tell us more about Cattle Australia, first of all, and how long you've been around for.
Yeah, mate. So Cattle Australia is the peak industry body for the grass-fed cattle sector in Australia. We represent all grass-fed levy payers across the country. We are the voice. We've sort of got two roles. So one of our roles is to oversight and guide the investment of the grass-fed levy, which is sort of $80 million a year. through Meat and Livestock Australia, Animal Health Australia and the National Residue Survey. And then the other aspect of our role is obviously to be that voice to Canberra and that voice to politicians on behalf of Australia's grass-fed industry.
Cattle Australia was very worried about the industry in early April. Has there been sufficient action to prioritise increasing costs for your members and push fuel towards the regions? And what is the industry facing at the moment with regards to the lack of supply?
Mate, look, I think we've got some really substantial issues coming up. What we're starting to see now, and certainly in the last couple of weeks, is the effect starting to kick in. Like obviously where we were a couple of months ago or a month ago was there was a lot of fear and concern. Where we are now is that concern has transferred into action. And what we've seen, especially across drought-affected areas of New South Wales and Southern Australia, we've started to see those increases in throughput through sale yards, where people have made decisions to say, I need to get out now. I don't have enough feed, and I'm not confident about the price of diesel. I'm not confident about the supply of diesel. So the last couple of weeks, we've really started to see those numbers start to kick up, and that's obviously caused a decrease in price as well. So for a lot of those regions, which are mixed production regions, one of the great unknowns and one of the things that the industry is really trying to get a grasp on at the moment is how many of those guys would normally put in a fodder crop, how many of those guys would normally put in a grains crop or a cotton crop, and how many of them have chosen not to. Now, the reason that's obviously important is because in 6 months' time or in a couple of months' time, where we would normally have those supplies of feed come onto the market for the feedlot sector and for a lot of other cattle producers across the country, not just in that region, we're not 100% sure what those numbers are going to look like. So it's not just the effect that it's having on people today who've decided we're going to have to pull the trigger and we're going to have to move cattle off our property. It's also the effect of what else haven't they done? What are the other choices that people have had to make because they don't have confidence in where regional fuel supply is currently and where it may end up in the next couple of months? So that's a real concern for us.
Yeah. What about the poor buggers who are the producers? What happens to them?
Well, look, there's a real challenge here, mate. The reality is what this current crisis is doing, and certainly with the resulting inflation that's coming with it as well. One of the challenges is we're just losing money out of the system. There aren't people who are making more money out of this, what's happening currently. Everyone from truck drivers through to bore runners on property, everyone's going to be getting a bit less because the reality for us is this money is just disappearing into the ether. These sorts of increases in cost on critical inputs and supplies, we just can't replace them. So the challenge that we have right now is this is money that's just disappearing. It's literally going up in smoke.
Yeah, and if you pop down to the supermarket, which I have been of late, been a very good husband. I'm just shocked at the cost of food, and I look for my brontosaurus steak, a mortgage for the house for that bit. And it's going to get worse. Do we have enough interest, do you think, from forget the politicians, just from the public in major markets? I'm sure a lot of them don't really think much about it. Oh well, the supermarket will work it out. If there's no supply, they're not going to get the brontosaurus steak, are they?
Well, and that's the challenge, right? The number one indicator of consumer behaviour, despite what other people might tell you, has always been and will always be price. The reality for us at the moment is the costs have gone up through the entire supply chain. They've gone up at point of processing. The price of exporting, which is normally, a critical outlet for us where we can claw back some of the high cost of production that we do have, that price has gone up as well. And their economies, most of those economies are equally struggling under the weight of this crisis. So what we've got is a sort of a global contraction here. And that's really going to be a challenge for us in the next 12 months. The benefit, I guess, well, not the benefit, or the one upside is that we do have very strong overseas demand and we do have very strong domestic demand. What we'll see most likely is people replacing the categories of beef that they buy. So instead of buying steak, they might be buying mince. But we know that beef is a mainstay for Australian households. There's really nothing we can do to try and mitigate the price increases. This is just going to be an effect of what's happening currently. But for us, I think one of the positives is I can reassure anybody that there will be beef in supermarkets. I can absolutely guarantee that.
You can't have spaghetti bolognese without your mince.
That's right, mate.
None of the chicken stuff.
No, that's right.
You've got to have the real McCoy. Just off the topic a bit, I see my wife is watching. Nothing to do with the beef industry, but it's a show on Netflix called Beef.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good product placement,
How
though.
do they come up with that? Anyway, what about your markets in the Middle East? Is the current stoush having any problems for the beef industry in Australia, or has there been problems prior to this?
Oh, look, access to shipping is the biggest challenge, and the cost of shipping is obviously increased. The reality from all of our markets is, people are still hungry, people still need food, and for a lot of overseas markets, they're not in the position that the Australian consumer's in. The reality is for them is if we're not supplying them, they don't have it. So we still have good demand. The logistics of getting things there is challenging. I mean, it's a global hotspot at the moment, and the flow-on effect that's happening to shipping around the world is a challenge as well. But I think the reality is a lot of these markets, we are their main supplier, we are their biggest supplier. They rely on us, and we have to find ways through. So the Australian industry, I mean, we're a 70% exporter. We're one of the world's largest exporters of beef. People rely on our product, and we're going to do our best to keep getting it there.
What about the fake labelling of meat and meat substitutes? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this all sort of kicked off around 2021 when there was a Senate inquiry called into this. What we saw during that period was a substantial amount of global investment funds going into alternate protein companies or fake meat companies. And we saw this sort of burgeoning kind of expectation that this sector was going to be a key supplier of the growing global population base over the next decade. And at the time, there was estimates in Australia this was going to be a $3 billion industry in 2030, and it was going to be substantial, and it was going to really take a lot of space. And as an industry that supports competitive marketplaces, we didn't have an issue with that. The reality is, if you want to put a product next to our product and try to compete with us, you're more than able to. You should be more than able to. Where we took issue was a lot of these companies were making unfounded and untrue claims about the beef industry and trying to elevate and leverage their product above ours whilst using our terminology. So they were using things like this is a sausage, or this is a steak, or this is a chicken patty, where in reality it wasn't. It was some sort of lab concoction that they'd made with soy and a variety of different chemicals. And what they were trying to say to people was, our products are better, and our products are safer, and our products are more environmentally friendly, when a lot of that hadn't actually been proven at the time. So what happened was, at the time, it was a big international issue. There was a lot of investment companies, money going into these companies. They were using a lot of that to advertise the benefits of their product over beef and over chicken and over lamb, and we took issue with that. So we represented that very strongly with the inquiry and said, look, our expectations here are that there is a mandatory code put in place, or there's a mandatory regulations put in place for this sector to make sure that whatever product claims they're making to consumers are accurate. And that was really the key thing, that where our expectations were at the time and where they remain to this day.
It's incredible, the idea of what do they call it, plant-based burger. I used to know it as a veggie burger.
And I think, mate, to be honest, I think they would have had better success if that's what they'd marketed it to be. But this was for whatever global impetus this came from. This was an attempt to denigrate the work of beef producers and try to leverage a product on top of that. Now, what happened since that period is this sector's almost globally collapsed. From there's companies that are publicly listed in the States that their share price was hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and today it's 50 cents or 30 cents. Like this sector has imploded, and I think COVID had a big impact on that, because one of the photos that everyone kept putting up on the internet during COVID was the meat aisle was completely empty except for these products. So what's been revealed through this process is, despite a lot of the claims these companies were making, consumers didn't believe them. And consumers aren't actually demanding this product. And the product that they are demanding increasingly, that we've seen, especially in the last couple of years, we've seen huge increases in beef consumption, are things that are safe, things that aren't processed, and things that they know where it comes from and they trust where it comes from. So I think there's been somewhat an alleviation of this issue just through consumer behaviour. But our expectations around, if we see a resurgence of these companies again, our expectations remain the same. Our reputation is something we spend billions of dollars on over many years building. We're not having somebody make claims about us that aren't true.
Yeah, incredible. veggie burger is what it is called. But do you get worried? I just want to another question here. Do you get worried when you read about Bill Gates buying all of these? Because Bill Gates, he loves his veggie burgers and calls them other names. Plastic meat, that's a good one. But anyway, sorry, Bill. Do you get worried though when you read about all these, especially Bill Gates buying huge chunks of land that are a great pastoral land, and you know that he's not going to grow his cows there, or his cattle there. He's going to just shut it down, just have a great lump of ground and land and nothing else there, and people will eventually, I think he believes, move towards his plastic meat. It must worry you though, because these guys have got serious money and they can do some serious damage, can't they?
I think there's always dangers and risks, right? And one of the things, I mean, consolidation of wealth globally is a question that we should be considering, I think, as a global community. But one of the other things is the expectations that we're placing on the farming community globally and the regulations that we're placing on them globally, I think, if anything, are having are resulting in a net decrease of food, and not just meat. You know, and this is something that we really need to consider. I was in the UK over Christmas, and I was visiting some farms over there. And because of the way that the changes in subsidies had been affecting UK farmers, I visited a gentleman who normally had traditional wheat crops. So that's what his business was. He'd grown wheat. His grandfather had grown wheat. His ancestors had grown wheat. That's what they did. And he'd had to move out of a commodity-based wheat product to a heritage wheat product, because the money just wasn't there and the subsidies were no longer there to support production. So he's gone from producing 3 tonnes an acre to 1 tonne an acre, and the premium product is going into the centre of London to an artisanal bakery. So one of the things that I think we've shifted from globally in food production, and the thing that we spend a lot of time really making sure doesn't happen in Australia, is the focus on food security for people is becoming less important than the conditions that are placed on how the food is produced. And the risk with that is that we're going to have food insecure people. And the people who are most food insecure in any economy in the world are the poorest. So a lot of the changes that have been happening in places like Europe's the best example of it at this stage, really affect the poorest percentage of the population who are the most food insecure. So the challenge is, yes, you can place an enormous amount of regulatory conditions on producers, but producers have to find a way to offset that cost. And when they start producing less to receive a higher price, or they have to go down a non-traditional pathway to chase that higher price, inevitably what you do is you reduce the amount of food that's being produced. And so one of the things that we're very conscious of here in terms of how Cattle Australia approaches policy is everyone loves a Wagyu steak, and I want everyone to be able to buy one. But I want everyone to be able to buy mince. You know, we cater to people who need us in their household. Beef is a pillar of the Australian community. It's a pillar of every household. And we've got to cater for all of those products. And what we don't want to do is get to a situation where it's so expensive to produce even the most basic, simple product that we have to stop doing it. So we fight really hard for commodity production as well as premium production. We need to make sure that all of those things are available to Australian households, so they don't become food insecure.
It's very scary, and you're from the Territory. I'm from a place called Mildura, which is on its way to the Territory. People in the bush have a way of sorting things out. Maybe that's what we need at the moment. I'm not going to
Yeah, they're remarkably practical people, I think.
They are, and it's amazing how then you have a bigger after it, and that's how it could be. But I do worry about Australia. I do worry about the world. We do a lot of things with the UK farming community. There's an example on how to bugger up an industry pretty quickly, and the difference is, I think, at the moment, is that the people in the UK in major markets, in London, Liverpool, those places, they actually are fairly informed on what's happening in their rural areas. Now, it's much smaller than Australia. I find that those in the major markets tend to be, as in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, those places, tend to be a little bit distant from reality, and we probably need a reality pill, again, to shake things up. Will, if somebody wants to find out more about Cattle Australia and what you do and what they do, how do they do that?
Look, obviously social media is one of the easiest ways to engage with us, but our website is cattleaustralia.com.au. Please sign up to our newsletter, get involved, sign up, whatever you'd like to do. But we're always keen to talk to anybody who's associated with the industry.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. This is the Country Telegraph.
The beauty is boundless, the lushness limitless. Life has exploded across a region traditionally among the most desolate on the planet.
What we're seeing is the desert coming alive. We're seeing animals, birds and native vegetation just skyrocketing.
Unrecognisable, an oasis. You can see how the first settlers, when they came through, would think, oh yeah, well, we can live and farm here after a rain like that.
In the heart of Australia's usually red centre, communities like the tiny outpost of William Creek have been transformed by triple the annual rainfall from 3 intense bursts. Veteran bush pilot Trevor Wright, who runs the Wright's Air fleet, has spent more than 30 years flying tourists across the wondrous Karitunda Lake Air, which is periodically in flood. This year is different.
We've got to wait decades for something like this.
Not only are the Outback waterways once again brimming with floodwaters from Queensland and Northern Territory and funnelling into the lowest point in Australia, but it's coinciding with a much rarer spectacle. The usually barren Simpson Desert is now coated with grasses, with lakes forming between the 1,100 sand dunes that create this stunning landscape.
You've got to keep reminding yourself that this is desert country. This is desert. You are looking at the driest area in the driest inhabited continent and the driest inhabited state.
I'm 72, Ricky's 73. We'll never see this again in our lifetime.
Oodnadatta's famed Pink Roadhouse is now in the hands of the Calvert family. Dad Joe originally hails from Weymouth, England.
Coast to desert. But no, look, I think it's the sense of community that keeps you in the Outback once you've lived here.
After a dramatic slump in the start of season trade, he, like other business owners in the region, is trying to combat misconceptions, reassuring tourists about fuel supply and even reducing margins amid price hikes.
The best way you can help any community, whether it be during good times or bad times, is spending dollars in the community.
Danny Sheehan's events company took 10 tours to the lake last year. He says this year is no comparison.
I did have a lady last year who said she'd been around the world that many times she couldn't remember, but she said she felt embarrassed to think that this was just on her back doorstep and she'd never seen it.
First, the water flows in, then the tourism dollars flow in. Without that, employment to the region doesn't flow. Let's put that in perspective. William Creek, official population of 2, but in peak season that balloons to 40, all workers.
When we drove here like a month ago to go back to work, I was like, but where are we? Is this really the Outback? Are we really going to William Creek? Because this doesn't look like it at all.
The timing is ideal, with vegetation tipped to hang on longer amid cooler months and hopes a wave of wildflowers will blanket the terrain. And there's even more water from interstate floods still making its way to the centre of the continent.
You've got this small window of opportunity and you've got this colour that's a bonanza. It's like going to another country or another environment. It's just so different to the normal.
Magnificent part of Australia. Used to be dry as hell, and now it's just it looks like a paddock. We've seen the most magnificent images of dry and dusty central Australia becoming a landscape of lakes and rolling green hills. Now, if only we could keep this land wet and fertile, because it must have been probably 50,000, 60,000 years ago, maybe 100,000. Dr. Peter Reid is a geophysicist with over 100 publications and 35 years experience working on the Great Barrier Reef, and developed a wide range of world-first optical and electronic instruments for measuring environmental conditions near corals and other ecosystems. He was head of physics at James Cook University for over a decade before being removed in 2018 for questioning the quality assurance systems used by reef science institutions. Now, Peter's an adjunct fellow of the Institute of Public Affairs. First of all, Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for waiting. You saw the whole program. We actually played the clip I wanted to play before, but we'll push it right back to about midnight, of Central Australia. It looked magnificent, didn't it?
It did. This is the wonderful thing about Australia, isn't it? These changes, and you've got to celebrate when you have some good seasons. I knew an old grazier from Richmond out here in Queensland, and he reckoned, you have one good year every 10 years, basically drought for 9 years, a good year for 10 years, for that one last one, and you've got to do the best. And of course, Australian agriculture is one of their real successes, is being able to deal with this very, very dry continent. You travel around, you see these remarkable, off-river water bodies where they've, made little dams and they've pumped water into them. So it is wonderful what we have been able to do with this incredibly arid country, but we've also got to celebrate when it looks so beautiful like it does in the centre at the moment.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I've played it several times today because I can't believe how gorgeous it is. How long will this last for, Peter?
Oh, it'll be just a few months. So the lake air will then slowly dry out over a few years. And if you go back a long time, if you go back to say 19,000 years ago, lake air, that whole Simpson Desert area, was much drier than it even is now. So some of the clips there where you see those sand dunes, at the moment they have low hills, low scrub on them. They're not just a pure sand like a Sahara Desert. But if you go back to 20,000 years ago, those sand hills there that you can see there would have been completely without any vegetation at all. So we have these tremendous changes. And just to throw something else in that may be interesting to people, because of all the extra carbon dioxide in our atmosphere because of burning coal, we've gone up from 300 parts per million to 420 or whatever it is at the moment. The water utilisation ability of those dry plants and those grasses is substantially increased. So Australia, even in a bad year, is now greener than what it used to be in a bad year in the past. So it is now a greener continent, and this has been measurable from satellites. You can actually see it in the satellite data, and that is almost certainly largely due to the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I can explain how that works in terms of the plant if you wish, but they also see it in Africa and other dry areas. So it's one of the good things about burning coal and burning diesel and those sorts of things.
Tell me, I would love to know, how come, this is great English, why did the land dry out?
Well, some of it is the change in the way that the Earth's orbit and the inclination of the way it spins. So these are called the Milankovitch cycles, but they don't explain everything. So about 18,000 years ago, it was incredibly dry, right? And suddenly it changed. So whereas the orbital cycles tend to change very, very gently, there was a sudden change, and the world's got a lot warmer. The more water in the Central Australia, changes everywhere. Coral reefs out in the Galapagos Islands suddenly disappeared, and some of them came back. So most of those huge climate change events of the past, we actually have almost no idea what's causing them. And so this is one of the interesting things when you talk about the whole climate change debate, that are we really sure that the warming that we've seen over the last 50 or 100 years isn't just a natural thing? Because we actually don't understand the natural climate and the variations at all.
I've just heard two things. You mentioned carbon dioxide, and I heard the keyboards, when people type gently, well, they weren't typing gently. And then when you said they have no idea why we're warming, or why the Earth's getting a bit warmer if it's a natural thing, I wasn't sure if it was a click of a shotgun or their heads hitting the table in absolute despair. And believe me, that's not such a bad sound to hear. It shows you that if we had water for the centre of Australia, we'd have this magnificent, I would imagine, community that you could grow just about anything. But we need water, and I suppose that would mean that we would need to have dams. Do you see in your lifetime, because Tony Abbott once said we're the food bowl to basically the world, and all you have to do is make sure that you provide the water. Well, we've seen what the water does in the centre of Australia. If you were a good businessman and you had money like Bill Gates, for example, you would seriously look at doing something, because It's not going to cost you a whole lot for the land. But also you're going to have this great resource. All you need is water. And if you bring that down from the top end of Australia, instead of it going out into the oceans, we are actually feeding not only the rest of the world, but we're providing food security, which is an important issue at the moment for Australia.
That's true. I mean, I think you've always got to accept that Australia is going to be a very dry continent, that it is not easy to get water from the north. There are great expenses. But as I mentioned before, if you actually let the average farmer just deal with, because there's a lot of groundwater, and Australians are very good at using that groundwater. Storage of water during floods, not necessarily in great big dams, but in much smaller things, as you see in the Darling Downs and various other areas. But although that there's a lot of hoo-ha about not allowed to be building dams, I've heard of lots of graziers who've been saying that they're not able to build smaller dams just off a creek to try to capture the flood water so that they can then use it for cropping or whatever later on in the season. So that's regulations that are stopping these things happening. They're not the great big things, but there's 1,000 examples of where little things are being stopped. So yes, we're never going to be a food bowl like the centre of Europe or something like that. We're always going to be very dry. But on the other hand, we can do better than we are now, and we are undoubtedly being greatly restricted in many, many ways. As Will said just before, in so many ways, and that's actually causing people in Indonesia, if we don't produce a cow here, then somebody in Indonesia with live export trade, they're not going to be having mince or sausages or anything like that if we don't produce.
Plastic meat, that's what Bill wants us to eat, or veggie burger. No, it doesn't really cut the cake, does it? Or the burger bun. Tell us about your thoughts, because I see Chris Bowen, this is just off topic a bit. Chris Bowen he's like this pygmy on this big horse who thinks he's Sir Galahad saving the world. Should remind him what happened to Joan of Arc. But I'm just thinking though, if you look at your area, Townsville, you've got these monstrosities going up, erasing parts of the Great Dividing Range and creating all sorts of problems once they're installed. We see farmers in Victoria being bulldozed out of the road because of saving the planet. We see other issues, the push for renewables, and they're never going to work. Then we see data centres popping up that require a great chunk of water and constant energy. Net zero, they're still gung-ho about it. How do we, and we talk about changing, you can change a direction of a country by changing political parties. As far as I can see, there's not a whole lot of difference still, even though Angus is there. Look at Victoria, Jess Wilson. She's as woke as get out of here, and her policies on the environment and renewable energy is fairly similar to that of Jacinta Allen. How do we make a difference? How can we get into people's minds that, one, they've had a bad education to believe a lot of this claptrap, and secondly, how do we get them to say, okay, this is not the way we should be going. We need to be doing this differently. How do you get through their numbskulls, their brains?
Well, the numbskulls are not the general public. If you actually look at opinion polls now and you ask the question, so the Institute of Public Affairs has done this again and again, how much are you prepared to pay for net zero? The average answer is $2 a week, all right? $2 a week. Now, all we need to do is make sure that everybody realises that you're paying through your taxes and your electricity bills and all the other things, you're paying probably 50 times that. And I think most people have actually got a feel of that. That's why they, if you don't really think that climate change is a big problem, then you're only prepared to pay $2 a week, right? So they actually get a feeling there's an exaggeration. So the problem is not the general populace. The problem is the inner city politicians, and I won't name any, but Matt Canavan is the opposite of that, right? So the leader of the Nationals is completely the opposite of that. You've obviously got Pauline Hanson, who would remove net zero at a drop of a hat. So the problem, I don't think, is the people. I think the problem is the politicians haven't actually quite realised that the populace has moved on. They've certainly moved on in Europe, they've moved on in America, and as I say, the key thing that tells you this is how much the average person is prepared to pay. And I wish some of those so-called conservative politicians in the cities would actually look at that data and actually start to become sensible again on energy and energy costs, because I'm sure that it's a vote winner for them.
Yeah, could you then tell me why the political parties are sticking with this?
I think they're scared. I really think that you'll find that in those inner cities, they talk amongst themselves, amongst the elites, and of course the elites are the only people who care about this, right? The average person who's just in the western suburbs of Sydney or in the poorer parts of Melbourne, they want to just make sure they can fill up their tank and do all these things and live it. They're not interested in saving the world. But the elites in the political parties, I think they don't get that, at least in the cities. If you come up here to North Queensland, I can guarantee you almost all the politicians, even the Labor ones, are actually often very sensible on this, but not down in the cities. So I think they're just out of contact with the people. Now, it's very easy for me to say that to a politician, but I think you can see that in the opinion polls, in fact, now.
I think the bureaucracy or bureaucrats, whether they're in, as you have experienced in the past, with whether they're in government, local, federal, state, whether they're in universities or other organisations that profess to have that superior attitude. We know more. And unfortunately, with that we know more, there's always dollars following very quickly thereafter.
Yeah.
Peter, it's a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for waiting so much. If somebody wants to find, because you do a podcast, so tell us about that and how they can follow that and how they can follow you and send you a cheerio.
We've got a YouTube channel called Reef Rebels. I'm also the chairman of the Australian Environment Foundation, which is basically an environment foundation for sensible people like farmers. And we've actually got a new Check the Science campaign. So go to the Australian Environment Foundation website. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. That's Peter Ridd there, a friend of ours, and speaks a lot of sense. This is the Country Telegraph. That was Oyun, great place on the way to Mildura. And Oyun's got a magnificent pub there. We've spoken to people on the program who've frequented that pub. If you're wondering what the weather's going to be like around Australia, we're thanks to the Bureau of Meteorology.
Hello and happy Wednesday. Angus here at the Bureau. This is the National Weather Forecast. We're taking a look at Thursday's weather and not a whole lot to say different from the last few days. Pretty static weather situation remains across the country, but this high pressure area to the south, which has been causing so much settled, fine, warm weather, is gradually drifting further away from the country towards New Zealand and slowly departing Australia. Now that won't mean a big shift in our weather pattern just yet, but it is signalling that we will have some changes on the way across our southern states. We have these low pressure regions to the far south. Those are building, those are brewing, those are developing, and they will move on to southern parts in the next few days, particularly once we get into the weekend. Rainfall, well, not a lot of it to talk about. A little bit in eastern Queensland on Thursday. Most of the rain will be around the North Tropical Coast through the Cairns, Innisfail, Cooktown, Port Douglas region up there in the north. There is the slight chance of a shower across all eastern areas from Townsville southwards, but I want to emphasise that word slight chance. Very hit and miss. Lots of people in eastern Queensland won't notice any showers tomorrow, and those that do will just get low rainfall totals. A clear, sunny, mild autumn day for all inland parts. That could be used to describe this area. Clear, sunny, mild, verging on warm actually for the time of year for much of New South Wales and ACT. Canberra at 22 degrees, western spots at about 27, 28, Sydney at about 24. A couple of light showers expected across the east coast, mostly north of Sydney, and nothing too heavy in store for anyone. Quick forecast once again for Victoria. A little bit of morning cloud and fog that melts away early, and then it is a sunny, warm day. Temperatures really high for the time of year, again in the 20s through the entire state. Melbourne tracking towards 25 degrees. Other spots could be 1 or 2 higher, including Geelong tracking towards 27. Also extremely warm in Tasmania. Seeing 23s and 25s on a map down here is just not something we're used to at the end of April heading in towards May. Hobart at a high of 23. There will be a little bit more wind around here on Thursday, a northerly flow coming down from the top of the map, pulling a little bit of cloud with it, so it won't be bright blue skies and sunshine all day. It'll be a mixture of cloudy skies and some sunny spells. And there will also be at least partial cloud cover right across southern SA on Thursday as well, all the way from the Nullarbor down to Mount Gambier. But once again, take a look at those temperatures, just way above the averages for April. 28 in Adelaide, we've got some 30s in other southern parts as well, and 30s right through the interior. No rain in the forecast here. There is a little bit of rain for inland Western Australia through the goldfields down towards the Esperance coast, maybe across to parts of the Eucla. Could even see some storms in this inland region as well. They'll be fairly hit and miss when they do develop. Out towards the west coast from Albany up towards Perth, mostly fine weather, but we'll see a couple of showers rolling through, particularly second half of the day. Perth shouldn't see much rainfall, maybe a quick shower in the afternoon or evening. Anyone north of there through Geraldton out towards the far northwest of the country, we'll be seeing fine, bright conditions. And finally, to the top of Australia, we just click through on the map here. We've got a few showers across the western northern coast of the top end here. Maybe a stray shower could clip Darwin, but that's looking to be a fairly low risk. Everyone who is not near the coast of the top end will be seeing some dry season conditions, mild temperatures around about 30-degree maximums, actually a little bit warmer across in the Kimberley, and the sun will be shining. That is all from me today. Of course, you can get more updates on the BOM website or the BOM weather app. Thank you so much for sticking with me right through to the end.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Saw the weather. We're on the Gold Coast. Just stop raining, would you? For God's sake. It's terrible. I haven't mentioned the word barbecue or wash the car. Those words have not mentioned any of those. I have now. We'll probably have floods. But you can't help bad luck. That's why God gave us roofs and umbrellas, so we can stay inside and whinge about the rain, drizzle. Just doesn't go away. Incredible. They told me the Gold Coast was the sunny place. Anyway, it's not. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch you tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be a little better. Hopefully our brand new system, well, not brand new, it's our updated system starts working as it should. Who knows? Fingers crossed. Take care, be kind to your neighbour, and have a good one.